extremely sunny fall day for his visit to Rhode Island, and the airport tarmac was crowded with about 2,000 Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Cub Scouts, and Brownies, all of whom had been invited by Mayor Joe Walsh of Warwick. The Tollgate High School band was on hand to provide a musical welcome. While the crowd seemed to be more curious about Carter than supportive of him, he plunged in nonetheless, shaking hands with people 2 and 3 deep behind the fence. But he had no prepared remarks for the press, and after working every inch of the fence, it was off to Providence and the Biltmore. Bob Althage covered events there.
President Carter came to the summit with a two-pronged energy message. A message directed as much to the people of New England as it was to the delegates here in the Biltmore Ballroom. Conservation and money are what he wanted to talk about. The president saying that the most important short-term solution is for people to stop wasting energy. But the president saved his strongest words for the Congress. While reassuring the Northeast that there will be plenty of heating oil this winter, he renewed his call for the passage of a strong windfall profits tax on the oil companies. Revenues from the tax are earmarked for financing energy expansion, and Carter is clearly dissatisfied with the form of the tax legislation now on Capitol Hill.
The House would give back to the oil companies as a portion of the unearned profits over a 10-year period, $151 billion. The Senate Finance Committee would give back to the oil companies in unearned profits $374 billion. At the present price of oil, as projected, and at the present inflation rate. This could become a $1 trillion giveaway to the oil companies.
Many of the delegates said they were encouraged by the president's remarks today, but as Public Utilities Chairman Edward Burke remarked later, the real business of this conference is just beginning. Solutions to this region's energy crisis will come only with increased cooperation and time. Bob Althage, News Center 12 at the Biltmore.
The president wasted no time leaving the Biltmore, even though there were a large number of people across the street that he might have been able to talk to. Instead, he was into his limo and down to the Cranston Hilton, where Mike Mayfield reports the atmosphere was much more political.
The president arrived at the Cranston Hilton shortly after 10 this morning, accompanied by Governor Garrahy and his wife. The whole scene smacked of a political rally, complete with band, banners, and close to 700 well-wishers made up of Rhode Island legislators and community leaders. Mr. Carter's message was an optimistic one, filled with encouragement. He seemed to sidestep the energy issue, electing instead to remind his Rhode Island audience that Americans can prevail if they work together.
And now there's a rapidly developing understanding that our nation is challenged or threatened even again. And we are uniting finally. And when we do unite and work together toward a common purpose of having energy security, we will prevail.
There was an interesting side note to Carter's Hilton address. He landed a bit of a political snub when he elected not to recognize Congressman Ed Beard in his opening statement, or through his entire visit for that matter.
It made it clear that Claiborne Pell, Senator Pell, and Congressman St. Germain would be riding with the president. I was more or less on my own. I made alternative arrangements with one of the governor's aides to go with a staff car. I proceeded to the Biltmore Hotel, and of course I was at the Colonial Hilton when the president introduced the delegation. He excluded me and didn't mention the fact that I was a member of the delegation. Outside of that, I did say goodbye to the president. The president, he says, "Thanks for coming out and greeting me." And then he got on the plane, and that was it.
The president's visit sparked some negative and positive responses from several Rhode Island groups today. News Center 12's Adrian Scott has more.
No presidential visit is complete without demonstrators. They ranged from anti-nuke people to labor group members who chanted against the oil companies. The numbers were small, and there seemed to be more police than bystanders. Then there were the chosen few, lucky enough to be on the inside looking out.
This is a service organization of Providence College, so the governor's office asked us if we'd like to help out today. So it's nice. I've never seen the president in person, and we just, in passing, we didn't get to really talk to him, but it's just nice to be around.
Perhaps the president noticed the relatively few numbers. After his speech, he gave nary a shake of the hand to onlookers, only a few waves, and off he went. At the Cranston Hilton, more demonstrators occupied the grounds, but they were severely limited by security and fairly sedate.
We can't understand why, if the oil companies are making 200% over what they're making last year, and many of them are, why we can't even afford oil in New England, where we're all going to freeze to death this winter.
Amazingly, one lucky little Rhode Island girl had an experience she'll never forget.
I was standing in line and he was walking by us, and I just went up to him. I said, "President Carter," and he said, "Yes." So I said, on behalf of the Plymouth Bay Girl Scout Council, I'd like to present you with a first-class pin. He says, "Thank you very much and congratulations."
And a curious Carter watcher had these observations about the big visit.
Oil is his #1 problem. That's what all these people seem to be shouting about. What he plans to do before the election to get himself rolling again.
Perhaps it's a sign of disillusionment with the government and the presidency, but despite the fact that the president's entrances and exits were split-second maneuvers, and despite the fact that security made it tough to get close enough to see his face, and despite the fact that the visit came during mid-morning on a working day, it's hard to deny that turnout along the streets of Rhode Island was very small. Adrienne Scott, News Center 12 in Cranston.
And around 11 a.m., just 2.5 hours after he arrived, the president was on his way home, and 2 Rhode Island men were under arrest. While Carter was getting on Air Force One, state police noticed 2 men carrying shotguns in a wooded area near the airport. It is likely they will not be held, though, since they claim to be hunters, and their weapons were loaded with birdshot. They apparently were just 2 men in the wrong place at the wrong time. Walter?